So hi everyone, welcome to the Synology Partner Online Training. Once again, we have a great topic for you here today. We are going over how Synology Hybrid Share can help you bring those scattered users across multiple locations together by utilizing the Synology ecosystem. We're going to be focusing on some great features inside DSM like Hybrid Share, Synology C2 Identity, as well as integrations on the NAS like Synology Drive to help connect your remote workers. Now a quick introduction. My name is Thomas, I'm a product specialist here at Synology and I'm going to be your guide for this one today. Now, one of the most critical components inside of your business's network is, of course, your file server. This is the component inside of your network that actually serves data out to you, the managers, as well as your workers. They will need to use this file server to pull the necessary data to get their jobs done. Now, in the past, using a Synology NAS was an easy way to actually shed some of the burden of having to scale a normal file server for your workers. With a Synology NAS, you can easily add expansion units to increase your overall capacity, or you can upgrade to a larger, more powerful unit to serve more users as your business grows. But today, we are taking things a step even further. We're still going to use those great Synology NAS systems that are expandable, but this time we're going to also add some cloud features like Synology C2 Hybrid Share, through Synology C2 Storage, and C2 Identity to make sure permissions are synced across your entire organization. What this is going to achieve is a hybrid architecture that supports both your on-site users as well as your remote users through Synology Drive. Through this, it's going to make managing it all a breeze because you'll be able to take care of all different settings through one easy-to-use web portal, especially when it comes to your users and your permissions in C2 Identity. So let's get started. This diagram is going to be our guide for today. We're going to be building out a similar setup to this as we work our way through today's session. Now, there are a few different components here in this setup. You have offices across the continent, one in the UK and one in Finland. Each of these offices has a NAS for their file server at those respective offices, and they have on-site users actually interacting with the NAS daily. Likewise, you also have some remote users throughout the continent that need to have access to your data somehow. Lastly, you also have Synology C2 Storage and the data lake there that will serve as a central hub for syncing between the two offices and between the two NAS systems. Now, the on-site users are going to be mainly interacting with the local cache via Hybrid Share folder. What this local cache is it's a repository of data on the local NAS that represents the most frequently accessed data at that specific site. And what that means is that each NAS at each location can have a unique pool of data inside their local cache that they happen to access most frequently. Any changes or new data that is created on one side will first be brought into the local cache and then sent up to C2 and made available to other sites on demand should they ever need access to that data. Likewise, the remote users can still interact with the Synology NAS that is closer to them through Synology Drive, because Hybrid Share can be weaved into the Synology Drive platform to allow these remote users to access the Synology Drive web portal or to set up direct sync tasks to those Synology NAS. So let's break down the different components that are going to be used in this setup. We have on the cloud side of things C2 Identity, and what C2 Identity is going to accomplish for us today is going to solve those challenges that are often in place for multi-site file serving. That's making sure your permissions or credentials are actually where they need to be. And what this is going to help us accomplish is it is going to allow your remote users to authenticate with the Synology NAS through one credential, so they can even go into the office and still have the same credentials. And it's the same if workers need to transfer between offices. C2 Identity can help with that because the individual Synology NAS devices are going to be edge LDAP servers, and there are C2 Identity agents that can be installed on your computers and servers to manage those easily directly inside the C2 Identity platform. Next, we have Synology C2 Storage, and this is a really flexible platform inside of Synology C2 ecosystem. You can do either hyper backup tasks directly to the Synology C2 Storage, and or also use the Synology C2 Storage as a live file server location through the use of Hybrid Share. It's actually going to now become, in our case, the central hub for syncing between the different offices. So now let's take a closer look at what your end users will actually be interacting with every day. They'll actually be interacting with the cloud kind of indirectly through their C2 Identity agent, as well as through their local NAS, either through the Synology Drive client interacting with the Hybrid Share folder, or through SMV also interacting with that Hybrid Share folder and that local cache. Your end user will have that C2 Identity agent. Once they authenticate and log into their computer, they can then log into the NAS with the same credentials or map their network drives, for example. If any users actually upload or change data in that local cache to SMB, for example, that data will first be transferred to their respective local NAS, and then it will be sent up to Synology C2 and made available at the secondary site on demand should they need access to it. Simultaneously, the end users that are remote to their closest Synology NAS they can interact with their Hybrid Share folder through Synology Drive, either through the Synology Drive web portal or through direct sync tasks that will then be sent to the local NAS first and then again up to C2 storage to be made available on the other side should that NAS ever need it. Now the last few components here that are going to be brought to the table are of course your end user actual endpoint PCs and any mobile devices that they may want to use the Synology Drive app. Now that we know our goal for today and we know what different components are involved to make it happen, we're going to run through our agenda so we know what our next steps are through the session. We're going to start off with C2 identity. We're going to get our users and credentials all configured first so that whenever we get everything else configured, we're going to be able to begin using our hybrid file server pretty much immediately. We're then going to move into Hybrid Share and we're going to start off by partitioning off our Synology C2 storage environment first and then mounting those different Hybrid Share folders on our respective NAS devices in our UK and Finland offices. We're then going to move into some end user workflows that your users will be able to take advantage of now that you have a Synology hybrid file server. Then we're going to round things off with the disaster recovery scenario to show you how to gain access to your data on different equipment. Moving on to the next section, we're going to take a look at Synology C2 identity. We're going to introduce it and also set it up in our demos here. Now on this section, we're going to first take a look at what is C2 identity, because it's a fairly new platform and we want to make sure the entire Synology community is familiar with it. We're then going to move into why we chose C2 identity for our specific deployment, and the main reason why it makes it a lot easier to deal with all your permissions and user credentials by having a centralized identity management platform like Synology C2 identity. We're then going to move into the actual setup and create each component to integrate our cloud, NAS, and endpoint devices like our PCs and servers that might be on site. You may be wondering, what is Synology C2 identity? C2 identity is a cloud-based identity management platform that allows you to centralize both your user and device level management from across your organization. It can also help you create a global single sign-on environment, allowing your users to use one set of credentials to access their on-premise resources, like their PCs, their servers if they have permissions to them, the Synology NAS, alongside any cloud-based resources they need to log into, may that be Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. Now, even if you're not using one of those Google or Microsoft environments, C2 Identity supports custom SAML 2 integrations. So if you're using another third-party cloud platform that works with that standard, we can integrate there as well. C2 Identity can help you replace legacy directory options because you can manage your users and your devices from one location. However, if you have an Active Directory environment you want to keep in place, with a recent update to C2 Identity now supports integration there as well. So why are we choosing C2 Identity in our environment? First off, it's cost effective. It's free for one Edge LDAP device. We have a need for more than one Edge LDAP server, so we're going to use the paid plan. But this paid plan is still cheaper than using multiple Windows server licenses for multiple locations. On top of that, there's easy management. C2 Identity is a cloud-based platform, so we can access and manage the global domain from anywhere we have an internet connection. Also, C2 Identity is multi-site by design. So what that means is that the paid plan offers up to 25 Edge LDAP servers in that environment. So you can have up to 25 different branch locations actually integrating back to C2 Identity and to that single C2 Identity domain. Now we're going to set up our C2 Identity environment. First off, we're going to configure C2 Identity on the cloud side. We're going to set up the domain users and groups. We're then going to integrate the Synology NAS by creating an Edge LDAP server for that on-site authentication. Lastly, we're going to install the identity agent on the endpoint PCs and servers we want to be part of the environment. So let's go ahead and do this. So here we are inside of our Synology C2 account portal, and you'll notice we've already chosen our C2 Identity domain name. This will be one of the first things you're prompted to do whenever you log into C2 Identity on the cloud side for the first time. So what we've chosen for our environment is Synology Europe Corp, unique domain name. Now we're going to move into adding in users to our domain. You can import users and groups from an existing LDAP or Active Directory environment, but we're going to add in users manually in our case. So I'm going to begin filling out these fields for my personal credentials for this environment. And keep in mind, if you expand to show more, you're going to be able to add in additional details for the user or worker in your environment, like what department they're a part of. On the next screen, we're going to be able to choose how we want to activate this user. You can send an activation email, specify a password, or activate it later. Keep in mind, if you specify a password, you're still going to have to respect the password requirements inside of Synology C2 Identity. Now underneath that, you can choose whether or not to assign a license to this user by default. And we're going to leave that enabled in our environment as we click through the menu here. You're going to notice that we jumped ahead to when we've added in several. Next on the docket is actually adding in endpoint PCs under managed devices. applications like Microsoft 365 if you're using them, and Edge LDAP servers to your C2 identity environment. We're going to start off with managed devices, which are the endpoint PCs, servers, and macOS devices you want to be a part of your identity domain. So you're going to download whichever agent applies to your device and copy your connect key because you're going to need that whenever you go to install the agent. And with that being said, we're going to hop over to a Windows device. Just like any other wizard for any other software you're going to be installing on a Windows device, you're just going to click through this installation wizard, accept the license agreement. It's really as simple as just copying in that connect key you copied from the previous menu. Now once we finish this install, we're going to get a prompt to restart the machine, and we're going to go ahead and abide by that and go ahead and restart this device. Now as this is restarting, we're going to hop back over to our C2 identity environment and actually approve this device for our environment so it can begin syncing the credentials and permissions that are actually required to access this PC for your C2 identity users. Next, we're going to add in Edge servers, which are going to be the Synology NAS in this case. And as we click Add Edge Server button, you're going to notice you're prompted to actually download and install the package from Package Center on the Synology NAS. Keep in mind you also want to copy this connect key as well. So we're on our Synology NAS device here for the UK location. We're going to open Package Center first and go ahead and install the C2 Identity Edge LDAP server. Now once we click install, just like installing any other Synology package, it's pretty much automatic. You just click a couple buttons as you work through these menus. Now, once this is all installed, we're going to go ahead and open the Synology C2 Edge LDAP server for identity, and we're going to type in our server display name, what it's going to be named in C2 identity, and also copy in the connect key, and that'll bring it into the Synology C2 identity environment as an Edge LDAP server. We're going to do the same thing on our secondary device in Europe, the Finland location, and we're going to hop back over to the admin portal for Synology C2 identity, and also approve these devices, so they're approved to be Synology C2 identity Edge LDAP servers. So they'll get all the users and credentials imported on them. So pretty much at this point, after you've added in your managed devices, any applications you're using, and Edge servers, you're going to be able to then log in with these different devices using our C2 identity credentials. So pretty much your domain is set up at this point. Now moving into the hybrid share introduction setup, let's go ahead and start off with our agenda for this section first. We're going to take a look at the components of hybrid share and really understand what makes this new platform tick. On top of that, we're going to go ahead and check out the benefits of hybrid share and why you might want to use hybrid share in your hybrid file server environment. We're going to round things off by checking out the setup and tips that we have, and really just some best practices for utilizing this hybrid platform. So let's talk about the hybrid share components. On one hand, you have C2 storage, and this is the cloud storage, your expandable data lake that actually houses your C2 hybrid share folder. Your hybrid share folder is actually the partition space in C2 storage that is mounted by your Synology NAS whenever you go to mount your hybrid share folder in DSM. Now you have your local components, your hybrid share service. This is the NAS service that handles all the hybrid share activity to and from C2 storage. And then you have your local cache. This is the reserve space in your local BTRFS volume that keeps your most recently accessed files local for higher speed access over your LAN. Now let's talk a little bit about the benefits of hybrid share and C2 storage being used in tandem. First off, you get end-to-end encryption, and this is FIPS compliant encryption while communicating with C2 storage, and also there's encryption at rest. On top of that, there's high levels of resiliency and flexibility, so you can grow your C2 storage environment as your business grows, even if your data demand is increasingly aggressive. Also, this whole environment, just like C2 identity, was multi-site by design, and you can have multiple NAS access the same hybrid share folder to solve cross-site syncing issues, because your C2 storage environment is the central hub for syncing for all other locations. On top of that, your local cache provides high-speed access to files over LAN. There's also some tiering functionality there through a released, recently used algorithm. If your hybrid share local cache gets full and you still need to add additional data to it, it will evict old data that you haven't accessed in a while and save that copy up to C2 Storage Cloud and make room for that new data that you're uploading. So by using Synology NAS through hybrid share alongside C2 storage, you gain the privacy, security, and speed you get whenever you're using your local NAS over your LAN, mixed with the availability, scalability, and flexibility you gain from using a public cloud service like Synology C2 storage. So let's go over some setup tips and best practices before we dive into the demo. You first want to partition your C2 storage. You're going to be setting up a quota for your hybrid share folder, and you're essentially determining how much storage you want to utilize for hybrid share versus hyper backup, because C2 storage can be used for both. You then want to size your local cache to meet your organization's needs. Now, Synology recommends that you size your local cache to be able to handle around 2 weeks of your normal workload. The reason being is you'll always have your most recently accessed files on demand over your local network. If you size your local cache a little too small, then you might have excessive swapping with C2 storage, and you won't be getting the best performance possible out of your local cache. You then want to consider some relevant thresholds with hybrid share. For example, the minimum local cache is 500 gigabytes, so you need to be able to accommodate that. On top of that, the maximum file upload is 128 gigabytes, and your local cache shouldn't be more than 80% of your BTRFS volume. The reason being is if you dumped a lot of data into your local cache of your hybrid share folder, it can actually occupy a little bit more of your BTRFS volume, so it can't actually finish the upload to C2. So you need to have a little bit of wiggle room so it can actually finish that operation. So let's check everything out.
So here we are in our Synology C2 storage environment. You'll notice that we have around 1 terabyte of storage that we can play with for our hyper backup and hybrid share in our case. Now as we click through the menus, you notice we don't have anything set up just yet, so we're going to go to the hybrid share tab. You're going to hit create. We're first going to name our hybrid share folder and give it a folder quota. The folder quota is essentially partitioning off this 1 terabyte of space for use in our hybrid share environment. Keep in mind the minimum for the folder quota on the cloud side is 500 gigabytes. Now once we have that hybrid share folder all created, you're going to notice it's uninitialized. And this is important because if we go into our snapshot menu, which is snapshotting for the cloud side of this data, you're going to notice that we're going to be unable to enable our actual snapshot policy because we don't have hybrid share folder initialized yet. We don't have a Synology NAS mounted to it yet and encryption key set up. So we're here on our Synology NAS device. We're going to go to Control Panel, Shared Folder, and hit Create to mount our hybrid share folder. We're going to follow through this wizard, and first off, we're going to grant access to C2 storage for this specific Synology NAS. And we're going to click Allow, and then Next, and then we're going to choose that Synology Hybrid Share folder that we just created a couple of moments ago. Now, since it's the first time we're actually mounting this hybrid share folder, we're going to need to set up our encryption key. Now, keep in mind this is a permanent encryption key, and there's no way to recover it if it is lost, so make sure you keep it in a safe place. Now once that's all set up, we can go ahead and name our hybrid share folder, and also you'll notice that we had the hybrid share key actually downloaded to our web browser. So make sure you move that off of your computer once you're done with this whole process, but we will need it if we mount the hybrid share folder on our second NAS. We can then choose our local cache size, but keep in mind you want to size local cache to work for you for about 2 weeks of normal usage. The reason being is by sizing your local cache correctly, you can really reap the full benefits of having a hybrid cloud solution like hybrid share. Now once we finish clicking through this wizard, you're going to notice that we're now connected to our hybrid share folder. We're going to also need to set up our permissions for our C2 identity users because this NAS is joined to our C2 identity domain. So you're going to click on hybrid share folder and go ahead and move into the edit menu. Now that we're in the edit menu and we're going to go to our permissions tab, and we're going to go ahead and move down to LDAP users. And now we can add permissions to the C2 hybrid share folder on an individual user by user basis. And you'll notice next to these C2 identity users, you can see our Synology Europe Corp domain listed right next to the username. So we can add in permissions for this hybrid share folder using the checkboxes for individual users. You can also go to LDAP groups and also apply this to groups that you've set up in your C2 identity domain. So you can apply permissions to many users in just one fell swoop. So now that we have our user permissions figured out for our C2 hybrid share integration, we're going to move to our secondary location at the Finland office and also apply this device to our hybrid share folder and mount the hybrid share on this device. So we're going to click create and mount a hybrid share, and we're going to work through this wizard once more. Keep in mind this wizard is pretty much exactly the same as the one before. We're going to grant access to our C2 storage environment, mount the same hybrid share. The only difference is you're not setting up the encryption key this time, you're going to be typing it in or importing it. And then once you have this all set up on your local cache, reserved for the secondary device, now both your Synology NAS devices are integrated into your hybrid share environment in the C2 identity domain. Now that we have those two devices integrated and everything's ready to go be loaded into our hybrid share environment, we want to make sure that we have our backup plan in place on the cloud side. So what we're going to do is head into our C2 storage environment. We're going to edit our snapshot policy. And we're going to go ahead and enable it for a daily snapshot. Now keep in mind you can have a maximum of 32 snapshots in your environment, and you can easily roll back your hybrid share folder if anything were to happen to it. Now that we have our hybrid share snapshot policy in place, we can begin using our hybrid share folder easily and securely.
So let's go ahead and dive into our end user workflows. Now first off, your end users are going to need to log into their endpoint PCs through their C2 identity credentials. Now the C2 identity agent is actually going to be another option on the login screen for Windows, for example. And what they're going to do is click that C2 identity icon, and then they're going to be able to log in utilizing their C2 identity credentials. So let's take a look at how this workflow is going to be. How your end user is actually going to log into their PCs now through their C2 identity credentials.
So here we are on our Windows device, and this is going to be logging in for the first time for your end users using your C2 identity credentials. And you notice on this main menu here, once we begin the sign-in process, there's an option for other users right below your normal user for the PC. And there's the C2 identity logo right next to it. So we're going to click on that and actually type in our C2 identity username and then our password. And then that will get us logged in for the very first time to this Windows device using our C2 identity credentials. And you'll notice we'll get the "Hi, you're welcome" screen.
Now that our end users are all logged in, they can begin utilizing Hybrid Share through SMB, just by mapping some network drives on Windows, for example. So we're going to show you how to map the network drives and request new data just through SMB. And what's really awesome about this integration is if your end user is used to using a file server in a normal Windows environment, the workflow and the learning curve for this is completely minimal. It's like using any other file server, just on the back end, it's enabled and powered by Hybrid Share and a Synology C2 cloud environment.
So here we are on our UK Synology NAS, and we're going to show you how you can interact with our Hybrid Share environment through FileStation, as well as through map drives on a Windows device race before. So we're going to open up FileStation here and drill down into our Hybrid Share folder. As we drill down into this and into the subfolders, you're going to notice that a lot of these files have a green mark next to them underneath the status column. That means these files live on the local cache as well as the Synology C2 cloud. Likewise, as we hop back over to our Finland office and drill down into that Hybrid Share folder mount, we can still see all the different subfolders and all the files, but there's a cloud icon next to them in the status column now. What that means is that these different files and folders are available on demand from C2, but they don't live on the local cache just yet. So we can actually get this data in the local cache in a couple of different ways. We can pin it to the local cache permanently. What it means is that it never gets evicted from the local cache regardless of the swap mechanism inside of Hybrid Share. Likewise, we can always download any one of these files for full, just like you would in a normal shared folder. Inside of FileStation, it will automatically start downloading to your browser. It just requests it from C2 first, brings it into the local cache, and then begins the download. As we refresh, you'll notice that the folder or file that we just requested now has a green check mark next to it, showing that it's now in a local cache. Likewise, we can upload a file on the Finland side here, and we're going to choose just a normal Excel file, for example, and we're just going to choose book 1 in our case. Now, as we upload this book 1 Excel file into our environment on the Finland office, if we go over to a Windows device that has a map drive to our UK NAS, we can drill down into the different Hybrid Share folders. We can see all the subfolders, and we can also see that CSV file, that book1.xlxs file that we uploaded in the Hybrid Share folder on FileStation on the Finland office. But this time we're seeing it through SMB on the UK office. So that shows the full integration of Hybrid Share through normal file protocols and FileStation on your Synology NAS.
Lastly, we have our Synology Drive and Hybrid Share integration. So we're going to show you how you can use Hybrid Share as a remote worker to create sync tasks and access data remotely, even though a lot of that data could be housed in the cloud. You can still create sync tasks and interact with it through the Synology Drive environment.
So here we are on our Synology NAS device. Let's incorporate Hybrid Share into the Synology Drive instance. So what we're going to do first is we're going to open up the main menu and open the Synology Drive admin console. Keep in mind we already have the Synology Drive server as a whole installed in the Synology NAS. So as we open up the Synology Drive admin console, we're going to move down to the Team Folder tab. That Team Folders is where you can incorporate normal shared folders into your Synology Drive environment. We can do the same thing with a Hybrid Share folder because it's treated essentially the same as a normal shared folder. We can select this and click Enable, and we set up versioning via Hybrid Share folder. That's a good thing actually, because we already have versioning on the cloud side, but the Synology Drive versioning for the Hybrid Share folder provides versioning for your local cache. So once we click through the menus, we now have the Hybrid Share folder fully incorporated into our Synology Drive instance, and now we can begin syncing this Hybrid Share folder and interacting with it through the Synology Drive web portal. So let's go ahead and check that out. We're going to go back into the main menu here, and we're going to open up the Synology Drive web portal. Now, as you can see under the Team folder, we can see our Hybrid Share folder. And as we drill down into it, we're going to be able to see all these folders and files that we had uploaded previously. Now, keep in mind this folder is essentially treated the same way as any other shared folder that would be installed to Drive. We can go ahead and select one of these files here and click Download, for example, and it will immediately download to our web browser. And if it wasn't already in the local cache on this NAS, we would easily just click the download button and have it download after it reaches the NAS from the Synology C2. Likewise, you can also easily share your hybrid share data through Synology Drive. You can do an internal share and provide permissions to other users on the NAS, or your C2 identity domain from the first menu. And on the second menu, you can create a public sharing link. Likewise, you can also upload files on the hybrid share through Synology Drive and have it reflected through the rest of hybrid share environment. We're going to upload a few different photos here, and you'll notice that we're uploading it into our cross-site data inside of our hybrid share folder through the Synology Drive web portal on the UK side of things. And if we go into our Finland NAS here, go into File Station, look at the hybrid share folder, you're going to see that the data that we uploaded on the Synology Drive side on the UK NAS is also visible and available on demand on the other side of the relationship on our Finland NAS. It shows that you can interact with hybrid share through all kinds of different means. You can interact with it through Synology Drive, the web portal, and you can also interact it with through File Station, SMB, and have it reflected throughout the entire environment. So let's shift gears here and also interact with the hybrid share through a sync task using Synology Drive. You'll notice we're on a Windows environment right now, and we already have the Synology Drive client set up. So we're going to pair back to our Finland side, and we're going to set up a sync task. You'll notice there's also some backup task options for Synology Drive. We're just going to set up a sync task today. So now we're going to set up how we want to actually do this sync. We're going to set up our team folder, our hybrid share folder, as our NAS sync destination. We're actually going to drill down and have the main folder that we sync to be cross-site data, for example. So now if we upload our cross-site documents to the local sync folder, it would actually automatically be placed in hybrid share and distributed out to the other devices. Now we're going to select our location, and it's going to be the Synology Drive and hybrid share folder we've already created. We're going to uncheck this box to create an empty Synology Drive folder because we just want to use the folder that we have listed here rather than creating another Synology Drive folder underneath that. So now that we have all of our syncs set up, we can begin the full syncing process after we're done with that wizard. So we're going to go ahead and allow it to apply changes, and we're going to go ahead and click through some of these menus. It's basically just showing you all the benefits of Synology Drive here. But now we're going to go ahead and open our folder that we are syncing to on our local device. And right as we do so, you're going to be able to see all the different data inside of our cross-site data folder, for example. So we can create another folder inside of this directly through our Windows environment. And you can see on the bottom right that it's automatically making these changes to hybrid share and syncing it to the Synology NAS it's paired with. So we're going to start dumping in some new files here. We have a few files now in our cross-site data folder. We're going to hop back over to our Synology NAS that we're syncing with through that Synology Drive client. As we open up Synology Drive admin console, this is just proving that we are paired back to this Synology NAS using our C2 identity credentials. Likewise, when we open up File Station, we can now see in our hybrid share folder all that data that we created in that cross-site folder through our Synology Drive sync task, once again showing that you can interact with hybrid share just like any other team folder or shared folder. You can use a multitude of different avenues through the Synology Drive web portal, a sync client, File Station, and even SMB, and have it reflected across the entire environment. As you can see, even though we synced from one endpoint PC to a Synology NAS in Finland, we can also see that data on our UK NAS in File Station.
So remember that diagram we had at the beginning of the webinar? Our goal is now accomplished. We have C2 storage set up for hybrid share, and we have C2 identity all set up and a domain created. We have our local NAS as the edge LDAP servers for C2 identity, and they're housed in a local cache for hybrid share folder that we mounted. And our on-site users, they can now access those local NAS through normal file protocols like SMB, and as you saw, the learning curve for accessing that data is extremely small, as long as your users have actually utilized a Windows file server in the past. We also have our off-site users, our remote users, that can access that same hybrid share folder through Synology Drive's web portal or through direct sync tasks to their endpoint PCs. What's great about this whole solution here, this can all be done simultaneously. You don't have to have only on-site users or only remote users. They can all simultaneously access the hybrid share folder just through different avenues. So we're going to look at our final section for today, disaster recovery. And in this section, we're going to take a look at some disaster challenges, which are challenges with setting up a brand new file server that most admins are probably pretty familiar with. And then we're going to take a look at the resolution, which is just actionable solutions to getting back up and running quickly and efficiently. So on to the challenges. Of course, a brand new file server is difficult to reconfigure. You may have a bunch of other settings you need to change on other platforms. There's lots of downtime usually whenever you're setting up a new file server because you're transferring all your data over regardless of the need, especially if you're in a bare metal restore. It can take a fair amount of time depending on how large that data is in that bare metal restore. Now let's go over the steps to resolve this. First, after taking delivery of your new replacement NAS, you're going to want to install the NAS operating system, and that is DSM, or Disk Station Manager. And after you get that all installed, you're going to apply the config file that you might have backed up through your Synology account originally. And this is a new feature inside of DSM7. Now, what this is all going to accomplish is it's going to get all of the checkbox changes that you made and all the settings that you made on the previous NAS applied to your new replacement NAS. Next, you're going to want to join this NAS to your identity domain by downloading and installing from Package Center the C2 Identity Edge LDAP server. So you have all of your credentials and users now locally on this NAS. Next, you're going to go ahead and mount your Hybrid Share folder that still exists inside of C2 storage. All of your data is still there, so you can just easily mount that C2 storage environment, that Hybrid Share folder, and gain access to that data. And last on this list is just making sure you map all your drives to the new Synology NAS, and making sure that your Synology drive clients are pointing at the new device. What's great about this whole restore is it's not a full bare metal restore. What you're really just doing is joining the domain and mounting the Hybrid Share folder, and then you can pull down data that is needed, whereas a bare metal restore, the time that it takes will depend on how large that data is.
Here we are on our brand new Synology NAS. We're going to get this incorporated into our environment now. As we move to the main menu, what you're going to first notice, we already have our C2 Identity Edge LDAP server installed from Package Center. First, we want to go to Control Panel, go to Update and Restore, and go to Configuration Backup. Then you can click the Restore DSM Configurations button if you have a config file you want to apply again. This will be applying all the small settings and checkboxes you might have changed on your previous NAS to this new one. You can even restore this from your Synology account if you had that backed up there already. Now, once you've applied that config file, what we're going to do first is actually get this all reincorporated into our C2 Identity environment. So once again, we're going to open up our C2 Identity Edge LDAP server, apply a server display name, and also type in our connect key. And once we hit connect, you want to make sure you go back into the admin portal like we did previously and approve this device for your C2 Identity domain. Now you have your users all set up. Now on the Synology NAS, once again, what we need to do is actually mount that Hybrid Share folder, and it's pretty much the same process as we saw last time. We're going to grant access to C2 storage for the Synology NAS. We're going to mount that same Hybrid Share folder, and we're also going to type in our encryption key for that Hybrid Share folder, just like we did previously. Next, we're also going to set up our local cache threshold, which we're just going to leave it for 500 gigabytes in our case, which is the minimum. And once that's all finished, we now have the Synology NAS reincorporated into our environment, and that's how simple it is to recover in a disaster recovery scenario, using this hybrid file server instead of having to do a full bare metal restore. You can just rejoin the domain, mount the Hybrid Share folder, apply your permissions, and then you can begin requesting that data down on demand, rather than restoring terabytes and terabytes of data you might not actually need. You can just request the data that you need to get back up and running as quickly as possible.
So let's say time is of the essence and you didn't have an extra Synology NAS on hand. You still have options available to you for extracting data out of your Hybrid Share folder through the Hybrid Share download tool. Now this is a very similar tool to the Hyper Backup Explorer that allows you to pull backup data out of your C2 storage, even if you don't have a Synology NAS. This is just specific to Hybrid Share, so you can use this tool to log in with your admin credentials and pull down data from your Hybrid Share folder on demand from anywhere you have an internet connection. So use this if you can't get your hands on a new Synology NAS to do that restoration on. So we went over quite a bit today. Let's recap and go over some next steps. We started off with C2 Identity, which is a cloud-based identity management platform that allows you to create a global domain and permissions for use across your organization, even if you have multiple sites. We then went over Hybrid Share in C2 storage and how these can work with your Synology NAS and DSM7 to create hybrid file server environment. We then touched on end-user workflows, and these are the different options that are available to your workers and your organization now that you have the use of C2 Identity Hybrid Share and C2 storage in tandem with your Synology NAS. Lastly, we touched on disaster recovery workflows for how to get your NAS reincorporated into your Synology C2 Identity domain and remounted to your Hybrid Share folder. Now, if you need any additional help past what this webinar provides, go ahead and check out the other webinars listed on our spot page. Check out our knowledge base. All of our Synology knowledge lives there. And lastly, if you need any help past that, you can go ahead and send us an inquiry. Myself or someone on the team will be able to get your questions answered there.
And with that said, that wraps everything up for us today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.